A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Hope I remembered them all. You can stop me before I might have forgotten a couple.
Has it been a few years since you've recited the ABCs? What the heck?
Good luck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break, episode 38. Runner Guy with a bunch of numbers that I always forget. Oh my god, I just had a total fart. what is the numbers like?
2489.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Jeez, that's embarrassing. That's a good way to start off this conversation.
Most people just say RG, so it's fine.
RG, okay, perfect. I'm going to go with it. I know that's probably the easiest way to do it. Thanks so much for joining, man. I appreciate this a lot.
Absolutely.
So, for those of you who aren't familiar with Runner Guy, I know him from a lot of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, blindfolded, speedruns, all those kind of things. I know you. How long have you been streaming for, if you don't mind me asking?
Streaming, I think since like 2009 was when I actually got into the streaming world. I've been speedrunning even longer, but
yeah, that's one of the coolest things.
Yeah.
So I like to research and watch I try to watch your PBs and things like that. But you have YouTube videos going back 12 years.
Oh yeah.
Were you speedrunning before then, or that's crazy?
Yeah, I've been speedrunning since 2006 at this point, and it is kind of funny when I go through YouTube sometimes. It's like 12 years ago, seeing comments, it's like, oh my god, where does the time go? But yeah, it's been a crazy ride.
It kind of blows me away because as I've gone down the rabbit hole of the history of speedrunning and stuff, not many people were posting on YouTube at its very beginning. And YouTube, I think it was at 2005. It's just, you were in its infancy posting on YouTube.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of hard to even conceptualize or explain now. But when I talk about, when a trick was found, it wasn't immediate that we would have a video. Like, people didn't have the ability to upload it, and two, it was like YouTube was still kind of this new thing. So it was like people would just describe what they did, and sometimes that wasn't like you tried to pass on information that way. So yeah, it's crazy sometimes to think, where we've come since then. But
that's super interesting because there's, some people really do absorb reading something, a tutorial or things like that, and then executing on that. Some of us are better with visuals, so there's all different range. So the fact that it only existed kind of in a form somewhere, so I can't imagine having to learn some of those tricks doing that.
Yeah, it was different. It was a different time, especially, learning and practice, but yeah.
Well, so awesome. Let's start from the beginning. Take us back. Tell us a little bit about your childhood with games. What was kind of like your first console, your first games that you were into as a kid?
So some of my oldest memories, I must have been like 3 or 4 years old. I remember playing Super Mario Brothers 3 on the Nintendo with my aunt and uncle. They were big gamers. My parents weren't gamers. I've tried to get them, but they weren't into it. But my aunt and uncle were a little bit younger, and they had a Nintendo. And I remember playing. I enjoyed, playing with them. And for my 4th birthday, I actually got the Nintendo, Nintendo Entertainment System. I actually got the top down, like the cartridge.
Oh, yeah.
I forget. I don't even know when that one came out, but I was born in '89. I know NES had been around for a while, but I guess this top down, one. So that was mine. And they gave me, my aunt and uncle, as a present, they just gave me that game, the Super Mario Bros. 3 cartridge. So I played that a ton. That was really my first experience, with gaming. And kind of from there, I ended up getting, I was always a Nintendo fanboy. I ended up getting the SNES and then 64 after that. So that's really where it started for me.
It's interesting with SMB3 because, first of all, it's the first game I speedrun. It's still one of my favorite games of all time. But I just, first of all, the game is wonderful. It's brilliant and everything. But I think about all of us as kids, that was one of the games we got so much replay value out of. It's pretty amazing they created a game like that had so much replay value in all these different ways, Yeah,
it's crazy because, you didn't really even have saves. There wasn't even a big story. The graphics, it was good for NES, but it was but yeah, I remember at the time, the big thing for me was getting through that first world. It's like, okay, I beat the first castle, and then my aunt and uncle showed me where the whistles were. It was like, oh, okay, Then I could go jump to 8, and it's like, there were just so many different things you could, you bring back and play with that game. So
I'm curious if you've had this experience, because one of the things I find masterful of most Mario games in general is how there are if if you're not a speedrunner, you can still play the game and find enjoyment. But if you're a speedrunner, there's all these other things you could do. Like, it's got an amazing amount of depth to it, considering to appeal to that wide of an audience, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you want to go through and try and do, all levels, if you want to try and go through and, like do the whistles, there's a bunch of different ways you could, play. You could try and do Little Mario. There's challenges, that you could kind of set up for yourself to make it, more interesting.
Absolutely. So what was the first Zelda game then that you played, and when was that?
Okay, I remember, I think, getting hold of the Zelda 2 cartridge. I actually had that for Nintendo. And I remember getting to, I was way too young for that game. It's a hard game anyway,
so
but
as an
Zelda
adult.
2, yeah, I got to the first temple and never got much further than that. So that wasn't a really good experience, in terms of Zelda. It was really, for me, and somehow I ended up skipping over Link to the Past. I'm not sure how I never got my hands on it or never really tried it, but it was really Ocarina of Time for Nintendo 64. That was my first true experience with a Zelda game.
If you don't mind asking, how old were you your earliest memories of playing Ocarina of Time?
Oh, I think I got the Nintendo 64 when I was 8, and I'm pretty sure 8, and then it came out in 1999. I would have been 9 or 10, I think. The time
when Ocarina of Time came out, I was in high school, so I had a little bit. I had a little bit of a grasp of how to play a game and stuff. I'm curious, somebody who's as young as you were you able to still enjoy it and get something out of it? Because it's a huge game, especially for somebody who's 9 or 10.
So, I remember struggling. I made it through the Deku Tree, no problem. That was big. And then from there, it just felt like the world opened up almost too much for, like you said, someone that was that young. And it was just like, I made my second file. There were 3 files. I picked, my main file was my file, and then I called one fish. And I would beat Deku Tree, and I just went fishing. And that was all I did on that file. Because, okay, I can go there and fish, and that was fun, But yeah, it took me a while to kind of really get onto the story. I ended up, probably a year or 2, I ended up getting a strategy guide.
Okay,
and
there you go.
Once I got to that point, I could read it, especially like Water Temple. It's like, okay, read this, do it in the game. Read this, do it in the game, because otherwise I'm gonna get lost.
Oh yeah, totally.
But and my cousin, I had a cousin who was a couple years older who liked gaming. He helped me out through, I think, beyond like Fire Temple to near the end of the game, because it does get to be challenging for a kid to do. So yeah, my first experience with it wasn't a full knowledge or a full understanding, but I fell in love with the game.
What was it about it? Was it I'm curious what appealed to you, and what's the thing that made you fall for the game?
Yeah, I feel like I've always liked puzzles. I've always liked trying to solve those types of things. And looking back at it now, it's like, well, these puzzles are easy. Like, you just push these blocks around. But as a 10-year-old kid, it's like, this is actually a really challenging 3D conceptual type of thing. So that drew me to it, and I really just liked that you could kind of go out and do whatever you wanted. At least at that time, in terms of open world game, to be able to do that, it felt unlike most games that pre N64 era. You had a lot of 2D scrollers and things like that. So it was my first true experience with those types of games.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I have to admit, so Ocarina of Time is probably my favorite game of all time, and I'm going to try not to geek out on it too much while I'm talking to you, but that's I'm really excited about getting the chance to chat it. But to your point, I think it so exactly encapsulates. At the time, it felt like there was this whole new world that I got to participate in. And as a high school kid who was kind of into sci-fi and things, I liked Star Trek and things like Star Wars was just like mind-blowing to me. It felt like I got to participate in another world. Like there was something real about Hyrule. And I don't know what it is. I still struggle to articulate it, but it felt like what open world games feel like today. Like it felt like you had the freedom to do things that you had never been able to do,
Right.
And it really captured my imagination that way. And I had played Final Fantasy VII before this, and even an RPG like that felt somewhat linear. Like it felt like it was pushing me in some directions and things like that. And so I thought that's what was interesting about Ocarina of Time. It felt like I had the freedom to do some things that I didn't have in other games. So. I'm curious. Yeah. Were you finding replay value in it as you're growing up and things? Like, were you revisiting it and things like that? Were you keep playing the game? I guess.
So I remember spending a good amount of time. It was also the time like 1998, 1999 when personal computers were starting to come into, more housing, and like at school, we had a computer lab for the first time. I was in like fifth grade or something, it was like, whoa, the computer lab, But that's when I first started to like actually look these things up in Ocarina of Time story. And
cool.
There was always the Triforce, right? That was like, I got so much replay value of like all the stories online. Oh, you got to go here and do this weird thing. You got to turn 360 degrees and drop the bomb, and all these crazy stories. And I tried some of them, of course, never got, but there was always this allure of like finding the super secret thing in the game, or like this quest that wasn't part of the main quest, and that kept me, replaying the game decently through those years. But between probably 2001, I would revisit it like once or twice, every other year, something like that, just play through again. But it wasn't really till 2006 when I found speedrunning that I actually picked it back up. So there was a gap there, where I was just kind of casually playing it once or twice here or there. But yeah, I mostly it was kind of beyond that. But I do remember those Triforce hunts. That was always pretty interesting.
Well, so thanks. We were talking about this just before we started up the recording, but that, your YouTube goes back 12 years. I mean, there's this awesome history of, and so watching your YouTube, I'm aware, okay, you were speedrunning in college and things like that. When did you first discover, or how did speedrunning come into your life? I'm curious how you discovered that.
Okay. So I was on an Animal Crossing forum back in the day. That was like my main game on the GameCube. I loved Animal Crossing. I was playing that every day, doing the tasks, talking to villagers. And I was active on this one forum, and I think someone posted, this was on E-Bombs World. It wasn't even on YouTube. It's funny how my portal to gaming was Super Mario Bros. 3. It was a Super Mario Bros. 3 tool-assisted run. And I didn't know what that was, so I just thought, well, this is a human player. And they were jumping around and doing, it was like, I just couldn't believe that someone was this good at this game. It's like, I played that game when I was, little, and I'm sure I'd be better now, but they're just, and so I was showing it to all my friends on this Animal Crossing forum, and one of them actually knew what speedrunning was. He said, that's a tool assist. He kind of explained what it was, and he linked me. He said, Speed Demos Archive, that's where you'll get like real players. And he linked me to the Super Mario Bros. 3 player one. It must have been like, well, I'll probably not get the name right. It's like Frezzy Man or something.
Yeah, Frezzy Man. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. I think I saw like one of his runs way back in the day, and it was impressive still. I was like, wow, okay, so this is, a player doing it. And of course, I kind of grew up more in the N64 era. I immediately started clicking on those runs. It was like Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Banjo-Kazooie, and that's when I really started to get into speedrunning. I was like, wow, there's some cool things you can do in a lot of different games. And I don't know, the allure, I was always a runner. I've been a runner guy before I was even speedrunning. It's just, I go to the track, I've done 5Ks, I've done marathons. I like to do, racing and things like that. So the allure of like combining, this passion of running and this passion of video games, and like seeing that this was actually a thing, was super, super appealing to me. So I felt like I was hooked immediately,
What is it? So that's really interesting that you're a runner, because there's something I always find what brings them to running super interesting. What is it about running that appeals to you? Like in the IRL running, physical running? Yeah.
I've always enjoyed the aspect of, there were sports in high school. I don't know. I know a lot of gamers aren't super into sports. I was into sports, but something about running just felt really fair. It was like, it didn't matter who the coach's son was. It didn't matter, what position you played. Everybody starts on the line, and everybody has a fair and equal chance, And I feel like, in speedrunning, it's pretty similar. You as long as you have the equipment in the game, it's just a matter of how much time you put into it. And I felt like the time you put into it, you see the benefits. You get out of it what you put into it. And I feel like there's just a really purity to that in running and in speedrunning. So, that's why I've always kind of been drawn to something like IRL running.
That is such a good description of speedrunning. I think that's one of the things that appeals to me about it as well, is that the only thing that's preventing me from doing better in a speedrun is myself. It's like, it's such a thing where you can improve upon yourself if you put in the time and the effort, like you're saying right there. So true.
Yeah, and there's definitely, competitive aspects to both of those. But at the end of the day, I think I posed a question on Twitter a couple years ago. It was like, do you find speedrunning to be more competitive in nature, collaboration, like glitch hunting, routing, or is it a driven thing? And I feel like there's those three components all kind of tie in really nicely. But for me, it's always been the self, improvement that has, guided me to speedrunning.
Man, there is no better description of the types, the different parts of speedrunning to community.
Right.
That's so true. Wow, that's good description. So
you can tell I've thought about this for a long time.
No, I love it. I mean, because there's sometimes I'm not able to articulate or describe some of the things that I love about the community. One of them is that I love the sharing of strats. Like I just love, yes. I'm a part of the TurboGrafx-16 community, and the Tassers talk to the RTA runners who, I've discovered this, I discovered that. And there's this, and I think that happens in a lot of our communities. And I think it's just really awesome, that aspect of it as well. Ben, you've obviously thought about it before.
Definitely. There are some communities where the competition overrides everything else and you want to beat anybody no matter what. And I feel like there are components in speedrunning, sure, but at the end of the day, it just seems like even top runners want to see other top runners succeed, and that's what makes it, I feel like, a really good community to be a part of.
Could not agree with you more. When did you first attempt your first, I would assume it's Ocarina of Time was the first speedrun you attempted, but I should ask first.
Actually, it was not.
Okay, see, there you go.
I think I was browsing around Speed Demos Archive, and I think one of the ones I clicked on was Super Mario 64, because that was another big game that I enjoyed a lot.
It's a classic. And
the 120 star run, I think I just flipped that on. At the time, it was like 2 hours and 10 minutes or something. It was still, for the time, probably pretty quality run, but I was blown away by some of the strategies on some of the stars, and I immediately was like, I have to go try this. So I picked up, my N64, put it in, and I think I practiced a couple things, but I didn't really put any serious thought. I'm just gonna see what I can do to 120 star.
Yeah, right on.
And it took me like 5 or 6 hours. It was like, all right, maybe I should, look at some other games. And I got to Ocarina of Time, and I saw there was, even back in 2006, they had already found like an early Shadow Temple. After Deku Tree, you went to Spirit as a child and got bomb shoes, and so you had explosives. And before I even got involved, it was like, whoa, there's sequence breaks, and that was very appealing to me. So I picked that up, and it took a while to get some of those going. But oh man, back in the day, there was you had the RTA runs, which I think there was a 5 hour or so OT run, but then there was the segmented runs, which they've kind of fallen out of flavor in the streaming era, which I understand. But it was basically, you would chunk up your run into different parts, and then you'd get to a temple, and then you'd save. And then you'd be done with that part. And then you'd work on the temple part next, and then you'd save. And then whenever you saved and you recorded that and you were happy with it, you moved on. So that was more of the flavor at the time. And I kind of put together my own segment. I remember I had a piece of paper and I had a stopwatch. And I would just time myself and write down my sections. And I think at the end I was 10 minutes over the world record or something. And I was like, okay, I feel like I'm actually, I have a shot at being good at this game. So that was kind of how I decided to go with Ocarina of Time at that point.
Yeah, there still are some people who post and do things and this on the segmented runs. And the things I like about the segmented run is the breaking down of the strats. If you're trying to learn a game, it's actually, I found it really valuable to segment your things. And even today, it's still a viable technique to improve upon a speedrun.
Definitely. It was probably when the shift kind of happened, when streaming kind of started to become popular and we were doing more racing and things, I felt like I had that experience of, I've already played with moving through these areas fast, and I was able to kind of chunk those together and be one of the first runners, I feel like, once we switched, that was able to put it all together because of that experience of kind of breaking it up. So yeah, that was definitely, I do think that is a good way to kind of practice pulling the run together.
I don't know if you can remember, but I'm curious, how were you able to capture your speed runs at the time? For some of the older folks, we've heard of the VHS capture and things like that, even before, speedruns.com and all that kind of stuff. So how were you capturing the runs and sharing it with people at the time? When I first got into it in 2006, I didn't actually record or do any, like I said, I had my piece of paper, my stopwatch, but I wasn't actually recording anything yet. But it was something that I was
working towards. I saw that there were the VHS recorders, and some people had the DVD recorders.
Right.
But I did look into the capture card thing, and I think by the time next year, 2007, I graduated high school, and I was going to get a laptop for going away to college.
Oh, yeah.
And I was researching those, and I saw some of them had, like a capture card built in or device type of thing.
Oh, wow.
And these ones were a bit, more high tech, more expensive, but I was like, I want one with a capture card. So my laptop, actually, I think I could take like the composite, the yellow, red, white, and put it into like this converter thing. And my laptop had a little capture software. So I was able to,
nice.
It wasn't the best, but it was good enough to I could start putting stuff on YouTube at that point. And so I hadn't even introduced myself in the forums yet. I was like trying to learn things on my own. I didn't want to be a bother. I felt like, oh man, I'm going to go in there and be like, hey guys, how do you do this? And it's like, oh, here's this noob, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's just, because they had discussions going of routes and strats, and so I was a bit hesitant. I didn't want to just dive in there. So I would go find where they discovered the trick.
Yeah.
And then it would be explained there. I would actually read through the forums and get acquainted with it. And I started just kind of upload my segment. I was doing my own thing. I was kind of not really in, and someone found it. I don't know how, they searched OOT or speedrun or something, and it was posted there. And then I was like, well, I guess I might as well introduce myself at this point. So that's how I kind of got, introduced to some of the people at the time.
I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people have the experience that you did, because when I first started speedrunning, you see all these people have been doing it for a long time. They've put in time and effort, so you don't want to bother anybody. But man, it's such a huge step to do it, because immediately you'll notice people jump on, want to help you out, they want to talk about it. They are passionate about the same thing that you are,
Yeah. And that's something I wish I would have, if I could do it over again, I certainly would have introduced myself early, because everybody's, super excited to have someone, come on board. But yeah, it can be intimidating.
No, absolutely. So I do got to ask, because you mentioned you've got this laptop set up. You're doing some of the speedrunning stuff during college. How the hell did you balance? I could not balance video games in college my first year. It trashed me to death. And I'm curious how you balance the two.
Oh, man. Honestly, I don't know. I look back, it's like, I don't know how much energy, I did that, and I was training for marathons too on top of my
God,
studies.
you're running on top of that. That's crazy.
I was running, yeah, and it was like, I'm not sure. It just felt like it was just something that I really was committed and passionate about at the time. I on my runs in real life, I would be trying to think of a route or some type of thing, or I'm going to practice this. It just was kind of always in the back of my mind. I was pretty good at, when I'm in class, focusing on class, so I was a decent, I wasn't slacking off too much. So I think by paying attention in class, I was able to get my work done.
Well, just going to class, that's probably a step ahead.
Yeah. But yeah, I look back on those years, and it's like, man, I was doing a lot of stuff.
It's unreal. You mentioned it, because I'm curious. So how many marathons have you done to this point, if you don't mind me asking? Running marathons?
I've done 4. I was committed to doing one in each of my 4 years of college. And the fourth one, I probably shouldn't have. I was training. I was really in shape, and then I had some knee issue. Ooh. I probably shouldn't have run it, but I just was so committed. 4 years of college, 4 marathons. I wanted to do it, and I ended up kind of falling off after that. But I mean, I've kept up with running a decent amount. I haven't gotten back to that type of level. It's a big commitment to decide to run one. So, yeah, I've done 4. I would like to do one again in the future, but yeah, for now we're at 4.
When I was college age, I biked the LA Marathon. I'm like, oh, this was super easy. I think I'm going to go ahead and try to learn to run it. And when I started training for it, I'm just like, oh my God, this is a huge. I couldn't find it. It felt like an OOT speedrun, to be honest, like 100% speedrun. It's so intimidating, all the hours you got to put into it and everything. So super impressed you're able to do that every year in college. That's a crazy accomplishment, man.
Thank you. Yeah.
So did you ever dabble? Tell us a little bit about the Majora's Mask side of things. Did you ever dabble in that, play that when it came out? Curious what your experience with Majora's Mask?
Yeah, when it came out, I remember that was still, I think I was a year or two older than when I got Ocarina of Time. I had the Nintendo Power magazines. I was, okay, Majora's Mask is coming. It's the next Zelda. It's going to be, the sequel. So I was super excited to get it and play it. And I remember still I was maybe 10. Oh, no, I was probably 11 or 12 at that point. And the time thing was like, I always felt uneasy. I was like, there's this constant pressure of like, oh, I don't, I like to explore, talk to people in the village, which in Majora's Mask you kind of have to do with the villagers. So I did enjoy that, but it just kind of felt like I should be doing, I got to be doing something. I got to be, moving. So as a kid, I didn't enjoy it as much, but looking back now, it's like, that is such a cool, unique concept for a game. And I love so much of that where you kind of go around to characters, you start to realize what their schedule is, what you need to do to help them. And that is a really neat idea where you do this thing for this one person, it changes how this, I love that concept now. I would love to see another game like that.
Dude, real, I couldn't agree with you more. When it came out, I was in my first year in college, and I was living in the dorms, and the internet was just starting to become a thing. And so the whole thing, at first when I was playing, it kind of felt like the Water Temple, where I needed assistance to get through a lot of these, because things were time-based. It's like your point, it's such a unique mechanic in the game, just that setup. And thankfully, the internet was around, because I didn't have the experience in games that I have now, where like maybe I could have figured some of it out on my own. But thankfully, there was this community, there people were posting on there, and I think I found this, those kind of things, which made it an interesting experience.
Yes.
Did you when did you take on your first Majora's Mask speed run?
I got into that. Yeah, I did. It was probably a couple years after I got into Ocarina of Time speedrunning. Probably around the time GDQs were starting up. I had done a little bit of Majora's Mask. The tricks are similar. In some cases, they're almost exactly the same. So there's a decent pullover. It wasn't like I was starting from scratch. And I think one year, Narcissa had the Ocarina of Time run, and Mike said, Runner Guy, if you want the Majora's Mask run, you could. It was kind of just. It's not so. It's so structured now with game selection. Back then, it was like, okay, Ocarina of Time's taken. Runner Guy, you can have Majora's Mask. I was like, sure, I'll go for it. So that was kind of. I picked up Majora's Mask at that point, and the any percent run, I think, the record was like 149 or something, and I wanted to be around 2 hours. And I think I got like a 208. My goal, the time that I submitted was like 220, and I got like a 208 on that run. So I was pretty happy with that. But yeah, I never got quite into it the way I got into Ocarina of Time, but certainly I do enjoy it a good bit as well.
I love that that's how you got the GDQ right in. Hey, Mike just tells you, you know what, we have a spot, you want it?
Yeah, that's how it kind of was back in the forums, where it was just like, oh, we're filling this out. It felt like he was just kind of going through and, picking some random things at times. But
well, since you mentioned it, how do you end up doing your first GDQ? What year was it, and how did you end up getting involved in that?
I was on SDA for a couple of years at this point, and they had done the classic games done quick. That was the first one in 2010, and there was nothing beyond, like N64 was not classic enough at that point, I guess. So it was all games older than that. So, but I was still interested in seeing it, and the whole debacle where they were trying to set it up with MagFest, and they ended up in Mike's basement. But still, the show looked really interesting. It looked really cool. And when they started to plan for, the awesome games where there was going to be N64 runs, it was like, well, we have to submit Ocarina of Time, Yeah. So I think they ended up picking like a 4-way race. There were 4 of us involved. I was one of the 4 that was going to race it. And I just committed. I was like, I actually, oh man, I think I missed like the first 3 or 4 days of the semester. Like I was like, oh boy, I'm gonna have to go talk to my professors, but like I gotta go to this.
Yeah,
I was able to drive. For me, it was like a 4-hour drive. It wasn't too bad to get to Washington D.C. at that point. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's kind of the first GDQ, and I've been to every AGDQ since. I just fell in love with it immediately. It was fantastic, and I'm so glad I was able to jump on board, especially that early.
What's it like to see that event grow from what it was when you first attended to what it is now? I mean, it's this whole behemoth.
Yeah, it's honestly hard to even conceptualize. Like, I remember us being in like that basement room where the stream room would have like 10 people in it, and that's including like the tech and the commentary. Right. And you'd have like maybe 40 or 50 people around, like the whole event. Everybody almost knew everybody else. like everybody
That's great.
in there. And to walk around now, it's just like I have to constantly remind myself, like, there's 2,000 people, here.
It's wild.
It's hard to really pull that together in my mind of how much it's changed in so little time. But yeah, it's been crazy to think about.
In prep for this, I can't remember what year I was watching one of your earlier GDQ runs, and literally you can hear like somebody whisper in the third row. It's like, and there's the crowd isn't mic'd or anything. It's just there's only like 10 people in the room, like you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny watching some of the older videos. But it seemed like that's. I got to tell you, I know it's a whole professional big thing nowadays. I help volunteer on the back end side of things, and I love what it is. But it's still at times I feel like there's still this community aspect to it. I only started attending in 2018, so I've been around while it's been bigger and stuff. But it does feel like it's still a very communal hang type of thing,
Definitely, and even within like the 2,000 people there, it's not like I'm always mingling with all these other people. It tends to be, I'll hang out with the Ocarina of Time people because those are the people I tend to know. But, I'll meet some other people here and there. It does feel like sometimes these communities still get together, and that can make it makes it easy for me because I've been around in the Ocarina of Time community. People know me. It can be difficult sometimes for a newer, person to kind of get involved, and maybe they don't feel like they're part of a community or part of a group yet. But I always encourage people, hey, just go ask if you could go to lunch with someone, or because everyone's like, yeah, come on,
let's go. So we're talking. That's something that actually surprised me about attending my first live event, and it shouldn't have surprised me, but there are many streamers who are introverted. Like there are many of speedrunners who are introverted and just aren't the most comfortable, like, hey, just going up to somebody and say, want to play a game or something. But if you're able to get over that hump, you can have a wonderful experience in the practice room because people are all there. We're all here to game. Like it's one of the greatest things about it. You could walk up to the Mario guys. You could walk up to the, the Zelda, the Metroid, all those different communities, and people are usually more than willing to hang out and play some games and to chat games.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing. People have come up to me after meeting me at a GDQ. It's like, oh man, Runnerguy, I'm surprised how quiet you are. And it's like, yeah, I tend to be more reserved. I mean, on my stream, it's like, it's my stream, or, an interview like this, I'm talking a lot. But it's like at an event like that in a big circle of people, it's like, I tend to be more, not the center of attention. And I don't know, that kind of took some people by surprise. Right. Or it still was weird to me. It's like someone comes up to me, I have no idea who they are. And they're like, hey, I lurk in your stream. So I can't even I know nothing about them, but they know everything about me. And it's like, I kind of struggle with that sometimes. They're like, oh man, they're shaking my hands like, oh, I got into speedrunning because of you. And I'm always like, I'm so flattered. And it's like, it's very touching. But sometimes I'm just like, I don't know what to say to you.
I gotta say, that's actually been one of the weird things about doing the podcast, because I know a lot about you. I watch your stream, I've watched your videos. Like I know a fair amount about you, and I've never met you in my entire life. So it's that weird aspect where it's like, but that's the streaming thing in a nutshell. So
it is.
Okay, so one of the best treats about going through the research of watching your videos and stuff is that you actually started, and this is actually how I found your stream way back when, was your blindfolded stuff. And I didn't even realize you had started doing, at least you have videos from like, I don't know, 7-8 years ago. Like it's been going on for a while now. When did you first think or attempt or do the blindfolded thing? And what made you think you could do that?
Okay, that's got a whole story as well. That started on Speed Demos Archive. There was the Ocarina of Time thread, which had all the discussion with Ocarina of Time, but there was like an off-topic video games one too. And I clicked that at one point, and I saw a post made by this guy called Jordan, and he wanted to beat Ocarina of Time, but he said he's been blind from birth. And he uploaded like this YouTube video of him beating the Deku Tree, and it looked like he did like a task. He did save states and like made it, and you could tell like Link movement was super janky. Like he was constantly like probably mapping out the whole room and like trying to figure it out. But it was like, man, that looks really cool. And like he wants to beat it. And his goal was like get someone who is super intimate with the game to like write instructions. And so I was like, oh, I know a lot about the game. Oh yeah, I could probably do that. And it ended up being like way harder than I thought, because I was like, Ocarina of Time is a pretty blocky game. It's actually really good for this type of thing. If you're on like a flat ground, for example, and you side hop 3 times, it's always going to be like that distance. So you can kind of make setups and strats, and we've done it for speedrunning where there's really precise angles for things, but there's almost always a way to like manipulate a roll or get right into the perfect position or like turn this perfect way. And I've used a lot of that with blindfolded stuff, and I was trying to write out these, commands or things for him, and it ended up being like he's got a text reader that he's listening to the his program read it back, and he's trying to do it. And so it took us off and on like 2 years or something. I was in college, I was busy, doing all the other stuff I was doing, so I couldn't really always get back to him. But finally, in like 2009, I think we had written instructions for him to go, and he beat the game. And when he beat it, I was like, wow, I want to try and do some of this alongside him, or help. And so that's when I started to do it. I would take either my instructions, or I would just say, screw the instructions, I know, I'll figure it out.
Right.
And it was kind of before streaming when I started, and I remember I would turn my camera around, point it. I would have like this setup where the TV's back here, I'm blindfolded,
right,
and like I'm facing the camera, and the TV. So like, okay, I'm not cheating, but of course people are like, oh, you've got mirrors up in here, and you've got someone else on the controller. Like everyone.
I know. Legitimacy, it's important.
Yeah, but then that kind of transitioned into the streaming era, and I thought this would be a fun thing to stream. So at that point, I was around the time of like opening the door of time. So most of the adult section I was doing live, and I just figured I'm not going to do any instructions. I just want to, if I stumble around in a room for 2 hours, I stumble around in a room. That's the stream. Like I might get one room done. But there was a certain aspect of it where it was like, the viewers could see that I was so close to something, and like, oh, all he has to do is get to that door, and I have no idea that I'm even close to the door. So they had like this knowledge. There was almost this, there's like intensity, or this like, I don't know, it was almost like a cliffhanger type of thing where they don't want to walk away and see me, get it after trying for like an hour. But in terms of, me, it was almost like another puzzle. It was like, okay, I'm hearing certain things. I feel like this room is this way, but oh no, it's not. Now I heard this other thing. So that was kind of my start into blindfolded, and I ended up finishing that streaming challenge or project in like 2013. And I've done other ones since then, but that was the first one that kind of got me into it.
I can tell you, as a viewer or somebody participating, it's extremely fun to type in chat, because we can type anything and it won't help whatsoever. It's like, it doesn't. And I got to say, part of the fun is the profanity and the frustration that it's like, it's obviously you really want to complete the thing. It's just like the same thing like completing a speed run. You want to do well at it, and you know that there's a way to get past it, but you can't. Certain things. So it's really a lot of fun to watch. That's I'm sorry.
It becomes like this up and down roller coaster of emotions, where it's like just getting past one room sometimes is like, this is the greatest. I am a genius. And then there's other times where it's like you're stuck on this what should be this little thing, and it's like, why can't I figure this out? And it has quite a range of emotions there.
Thank you for sharing the backstory, because that's super interesting.
Absolutely.
I mean, that first of all, that's anytime I get a chance to hear, like, there are people with disabilities who can play games, like there's a way to do it. I'm curious, did articulating or having to write out instructions like that, did that affect your speedrunning or any sort of enjoyment or playing, like, understanding of the game, having to like articulate that, like be able to say how to get past a certain thing?
Yeah, it definitely, when some tricks, it's like you've been doing them for so long, the muscle memory is just there, and someone asks, how do you do it? And you don't even, like, I don't know how to tell you how to do it. I have to go like, okay, this is what I do with my hands. Like, so there was a certain way of explaining that probably helps with explaining, to someone new into doing a trick as well. But it definitely made me realize just how much sound is in the game. Like, okay, I'm going to run this way, and now Link's feet, it's dirt, or it's grass, or it's stone, or, and we get into a corner and we almost use the sword like it's a walking cane. It's like, okay, I hear this wall, now I'm hitting a rock, now I'm hitting, something else, and there's an enemy way off in the distance. I can hear, you can kind of center where that enemy is, it had decent, directional sound. So, there were just so many little aspects, and it's like, there are some tricks that I probably use like audio cues for, but it might have opened my, understanding of the sound more than anything that I didn't realize was part of it.
I'm curious. I don't know if you had the same experience, but I only started playing games with headphones when I started streaming about 3 years ago, and I am so impressed with developers' how much a soundtrack and wearing headphones can affect even an old game like Ocarina of. I shouldn't say it is an old game, I guess, but Ocarina of Time, like it really adds to the pure just encompassing the whole thing. It's really amazing.
Yeah, the first speedrun, like I said, on that laptop that I had with the capture card, I didn't really have a splitter yet. So I had the S video and like the yellow. So I was able to watch on the TV and take all the audio to the recording, but I couldn't hear what I was, doing. And it was just, there's this certain I'm just not, getting all of the information.
Yeah.
And it was tough to do those early speedruns without actually splitting the audio.
That's one of the things that's always fascinating. So when I first started watching speedruns and Twitch, probably around 14, 15, the first community I went to was Ocarina of Time because it was my favorite game. And there was even in 15, there was a pretty vibrant community. You could always find somebody trying to speedrun it and play it. But the mechanics of what you're describing of how you do setup with tricks and stuff, and there's all these, interesting setups that you do for a lot of the tricks in the game. And I always found it fascinating when you did the blindfolded runs, how much you can use those to set yourself up in certain rooms and stuff like that. And I didn't realize that, like your point, you're always going to move the same distance when you do some of those setups. That's super interesting.
Yes, it's almost like, and when I would, approach, a new room of, if I wasn't just, using my knowledge of the room, if I wanted to actually write out instructions, it's like, okay, I'm at this room. And it becomes like each room is a puzzle. You have this toolbox of moves. And it's like, I've learned these moves from speedrunning. I've learned, these increments, how to change my angle, how to do this. I just am applying different ones in the room to get through the room. And it's like, okay, I found something that works. And then I close my eyes. Okay, I got it like 6 times out of 10. What's going wrong on those other times? And then you tweak it. And it's like, so it becomes this like optimization puzzle at that point. And there's all kinds of, even, this is blind. It doesn't even matter really, but the goal is to get to the other room, but I'm still trying to make it, more consistent, make it faster, pull all these things in with it. So yeah, there was definitely, using my speedrunning knowledge to apply different stuff to solving a room blindfolded.
When I first watched, I think your first blindfolded live, when I got a chance to do that, I noticed it was already happening for charity. When did the charity aspect come around for you, and why is that so important to you?
So I had done the first one in 2013, and when I finished it, I said, I want to do start to finish, a marathon run. And it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to do it for charity. And I wanted the charity specifically to be for research into blindness or helping blind people, guide dogs, something that was at least, related. And for me, I don't know, I feel like I have a full-time engineering job. I've never really considered streaming as a full-time career. It was never something that I, wanted to do, but I recognized that I had this platform, and not to get super sappy into it, but I feel like I've been very fortunate in life. I feel like I've, grown up in a good family, a good household. I've been blessed, and I know some people, are unlucky and, don't have the advantages that I've had in life. And so anything I can do to, use my platform, give back in some ways. I've been trying to get into, more charity type stuff, in the past couple of years. So that's something that, I've kind of decided I don't really use my channel for, my own personal income or growth. Let's at least use it for good. So that's kind of where I started to get into charity stuff with it.
A huge thank you. Anybody who listens to this podcast knows that I'm big on the charity aspect. I've had many people who run their own charity events on the podcast. The amount of good that this community does, it gives me goosebumps just to even think about it. And seeing an individual like yourself who's doing something like this, I got to imagine you've probably raised thousands of dollars at this point with the amount of charity streams you've done. Do you have a total by any chance? Because it's probably been a lot.
Probably since my blindfolded run in 2017, I think from that point to now, it's probably close to 20,000 altogether. And it hasn't always been for the sight savers. Sure. I try and tie it into whatever I'm doing. So I know one of my friends, she's a nurse, and she was doing type 1 diabetes, a camp for kids. And so type 1, we would play games with one hand or something like that. So just cool. Something that kind of ties it into what you're doing on the game. I feel like that helps with engagement and things like that a bit. So
it lends itself perfectly to charity. I'll tell you that, because everyone, it's so, it honestly feels just as exciting as a speedrun, because is he going to make it? Is he going to get it? Is he going to figure out where he's at? It's all those things that tie into it so well. And you've done so. When did you think you could do it with Majora's Mask? Because that one blows my mind that you could actually, because of just the way that the time aspect is built in. Like you're on a clock.
Yeah, that was ambitious. Looking back on it, I'm glad I did it, but I don't know if I would want to do it again. I kind of just thought, Ocarina of Time. I've enjoyed this a lot. It was very much every Wednesday. Like I had a weekly thing. I just kind of went into the rooms. I knew the game super well. Sometimes, I'd get stuck, but it seemed like I was constantly making progress. And I don't know, Majora's Mask, I don't know the game quite as well, and it blows my mind that it's like sometimes you think you have this room, laid out in your head, and it's like there's this one detail, and it's throwing everything off, and that just was happening a lot with Majora's Mask. So I needed to do more studying. Like before my stream, I had to like actually go walk around the rooms, like take notes of things, like okay, this is here, this is okay, I hear this. It was a lot more in depth of just getting myself up to date. I feel like if I knew both games equally well, it would have been about the same. But the time aspect, I was often slowing down time. I was often doing, chopping things up, trying to do, okay, I'll do this part on this day cycle, and that's all I'm going to get done on this day cycle. Right. There was just a lot of kind of cycles with the days. But that one was definitely a lot more challenging. And there were times where I felt much more frustrated. It wasn't nearly as fun for me, but looking back, I am glad that I was able to kind of, I took like a 1.5 year break from it. I kind of I wasn't even sure I was going to get back to it, but it was kind of a lingering project, and I wanted to finish it. So I'm glad that I ended up doing that.
In the traditional speedrun sense, or even in the blindfolded one, do any of the skills from OOT transfer over to Majora's Mask? Like, do any of the gameplay, any of that mechanics, any of that kind of stuff?
There definitely is. Sometimes it's an exact, like almost exactly the same. Even, your muscle memory doesn't have to adjust at all. There's certain tricks where it's exactly the same. There are some where it's slightly different, like the bomb mechanics in OOT. Just as an example, the explosion in Ocarina of Time like slowly gets bigger, whereas in Majora's Mask, when something explodes, it's immediately at its full size. So there's certain like hovering that's different. Certain mega flips are a little bit different, but for the most part, you can kind of move between them, and there are things with like the camera that in Majora's Mask, it's a bit delayed how it rotates or turns around. So things to get adjusted to, but it's a nice transition to be able to go from one to the other. I didn't find it too difficult going back and forth. And we've actually there were a couple, it's probably been a while, but we used to have like an OOT 100%, MM 100%, like back-to-back race. And there was actually some years where we would get 8-10 people, like a decent amount of people that would be good enough at both games to do both of those runs. So I feel like you can kind of move between both without too much difficulty.
It's one of the things as far as the leaderboards go. I'm surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I haven't seen the same names on the OOT top, 25 or whatever as they are. And like it seems like it's those runners kind of like to specialize or stay with their game type of thing. So. Even though they play both games. So
yeah, there are a couple people that will shift back and forth, but it does seem like they kind of they just prefer one or the other, and I think there's nothing wrong with either one of them. Yeah.
Especially, I mean, if you'd like to put up a top 10 timer or anything like that, at this point you got to grind quite a bit, so I can understand that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you did the Majora's Mask, because it blew me away, and it was a great event to support and everything. But I can understand how it might, make you not want to do it ever again, because it seems like it took quite a bit of time to prep and everything. Yes. So, okay, this one recently, so I guess it wasn't so much recent anymore, but you were able to do a bingo run at SGDQ. SGDQ or was it AGDQ? Must have been AGDQ.
SGDQ.
Actually, it was SGDQ. Okay. I think that's 18. Okay, cool. I'm trying to think if I was
They all start to blend together.
They really do. But I remember seeing that, and because I watched your stream, I had seen you kind of prep it and set it up. But tell us a little bit. You did this so well during the run, but tell us, what is bingo, and how did this whole thing come about? How did OOT bingo come about?
Okay. Yeah, this has a long history as well.
Cool.
So around the time, it was probably before most people were streaming, but we were kind of migrating away from the SDA forums, and OOT was kind of on the IRC a lot. We had a lot of conversation. It was just a bit quicker. We could kind of share information, more in real time. And we kind of got to a point in the community where a lot of knowledge was being shared and a lot of people were becoming very, very knowledgeable about the game. And the next step kind of felt like, let's do some races. And there was, I think Ring Rush had the first, he created this impromptu goal. No one knew what the goal was until the race started. And you had the intro and it's like, bam, you're hit with like, get the 6 Great Fairy rewards. And everyone's like, oh my gosh. And people are going around like, we didn't really know quite as much of the game as we thought. It's like, oh, you need to do this first before you can do that. And it's like, it's not just your predefined speed run that you've been optimizing and fine tuning. Now you kind of have to branch out a bit. And everyone loved it though. It was exciting. It was fun to do.
It's a new way to play the game.
New way to play the game. And so eventually we had a bot that would just spit out some random goals. It would give you like 2 temples, get all the Scotolas in DC,
so
boomerang, like 6 hearts.
Right.
And it's like, okay, now, and everyone was like unique. And so it kept it fresh. We were always racing. We were always, kind of doing, new and different stuff. Until a certain point, it became like, you knew which stuff you didn't like. And it was like, oh, I don't like what it spit out there. And everyone in the race, we would all be in like a Skype call or whatever. It's like, okay, we have a command .reroll. And so it would spit out some new ones. And it's like, the intro's going, we're almost playing at this point. We're re-rolling. And finally it's just like, whatever the next one is, guys, we got to go with it. And so that became kind of an issue in the community. And I think it was Peaches, one of the community members, he made a 7x7 bingo board of like squares that had goals on them. It was just like icons of different stuff. And I think the generator now picked one of them and you had to make like a line of 5 through it. So you had to do this one, but you could kind of shift it or pick different things that you liked. And from there, we went from the 7x7. I think Siglemic at the time was doing Ocarina of Time. And he didn't want to do the creative routing every time. He was actually starting to type out routes for each situation that would come up. And we were like, that's not the point. It's supposed to be this, on the fly thing. So that's when we had created a 5x5 board, and it was a magic square, which anybody that's not familiar with a magic square, you put a number 1 through 25, and each row, column, diagonal, and they all sum to the same total. So I still remember a guy named Giano gave me a list of like 100 something OOT items. He said, just rank these, put them in order of like difficulty. And so we split it up like 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. These are the 2s, these are the 3s. And the generator would actually make a magic square. So in theory, every row would be the same. And then from there, that's really the first true bingos that we were doing. And you only had to do 1 row. You didn't have to beat the game afterwards, and anybody that was in the race could do whatever row they wanted. So it became like, now you're doing your own fresh thing, but everybody else is doing whatever they want too. So you can pick your strengths and go with what you like. And so from there, it's been a mad like scientist type of thing where there's certain squares have certain synergies and like they can't appear with other squares, and like all these details of like, if you get this square, well, now it makes this other square like 15 seconds faster. So the total there's all kinds of detail. There's a whole spreadsheet of like just all the timings of like every square in relation to almost every other square. So it's like, it's insane the level of detail that we've gone to like optimize the bingo board itself, but it's still a great way to play. There's actually a bingo tournament going on, right now in the community, and I love the bingo guys. It's a good group of community. We all love messing with each other. Now we have like what we call the boomers versus the zoomers. Like there's new up and coming bingo players, and there's people like me that have been around for a decade. Doing like old strats. People like to make fun of the old strats. I'm like, hey man, it works. Like I'm gonna keep doing it. So it's been great, and I love the bingo aspect of it.
I gotta tell you, that's another reason. I gotta love the community, that there are people who are into the data, who are into the stats, who can figure out assigning values and things like that. That makes sense within what people can actually do, RTA, if you will. So that's cool that actually happens. How did y'all, or how did it get decided what the bingo card would be used for the GDQ run? Like, was there anything special, or was it just like a random one? Like,
so I wanted it to be not truly random. I wanted there to be a good showing of a card.
Totally,
I didn't want it because some cards you could have something that's like, that's probably not the best to showcase. So I think I had someone in the background. I think it was ADEF. I said, look over some cards. I'm kind of looking for like these types of things, but don't tell me what card. And he sent it to the staff, and they kind of picked. So
cool. Practice
was a little bit. It's like I didn't know exactly what I was, but I had some idea of like these are the things I'm wanting to show up. So that one was a bit unnerving. Like for all of my GQ runs, I get really nervous of being up on the stage and making mistakes.
It's only a couple 100,000 people, no big deal.
So that one I felt comfortable. It was like, okay, I'm practicing, the things that I'm feeling are going to show up, and I just hope I don't get slammed with something that I'm not expecting, or I pick something that I'm not looking forward to. But I think that one ended up turning out okay.
Well, and I'm not. Admittedly, I haven't watched all the runs that have ever happened at GDQ, but it ended without beating the last boss. There was not a title screen, and I thought it was so awesome because it still felt like there was a finality to it because we had seen the board. They were able to show that on stream and everything, and I appreciate that a live event took a risk like that where you don't complete the game, and for an audience that may not be familiar, that's maybe tough to understand. I felt like everyone understood it, but it may be tough, and so I thought that was really cool that risk was taken.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those things. At the end, I realized the end was coming up in like a minute. I was like, okay, we're almost done. Like, you almost want to remind everybody, like, don't have to go beat the game here. Like,
clap here. Need the applause side,
But I am the thing I think I'm most grateful for about that run was that I think it performed well enough that it allowed GDQ to say maybe we try like a lockout, or maybe we try some more randos, or maybe we try some of these other things. It doesn't always have to be this, A to B, finish the game type of thing, because there are so many ways to play different games.
I don't know if they changed this rule because of you, but they no longer require a game being finished. And that used to be part of the rules submission. And I run a game called Pac-Land. The most popular category is beating half the game. And it's like, it's interesting that now that you could submit that, it's, I thought it showed that we as an audience can understand it as well,
Yes.
So that was really cool.
Absolutely.
So you've mentioned it, but you've been doing GDQ now for a decade. Any memorable moments you have when you're looking back on all these years of GDQs?
Oh man, in terms of like the runs that I've done, I think to tie some other things together, the blindfolded one where I did the 3 Chao dungeons, I don't know that I was ever more stressed at a GDQ. That one felt like. I mean, I kind of always had pressure on myself leading up to runs, but it was like you kind of knew, okay, even if something goes really wrong, you can recover it, or you can do something. That one, there was legitimate fear that I was going to get stuck somewhere and be lost, and it's like there's a time limit here. Like I can't just spend 2 hours figuring this room out. So that one, I think, in terms of running, put the most pressure on me. Most of the other ones, I think. It was always hard, I think, especially because Ocarina of Time usually ends up at the end of the event. So it was never like I got to finish my run on the first day and then, okay, I get to relax. It was always kind of like in the back of my mind throughout the week. So I don't know if I really was able to fully enjoy myself during those weeks. But the years that I didn't have runs, I tended to plan some other things. And some of my favorite memories of GDQs, just some things like... not just getting together with the community, but doing different things. Like we would do team races that we couldn't really do otherwise, or we would do 2 players, 1 controller races. And it's like, that's something that you can't really do outside of, a GDQ event. But I think number 1 overall would be when we did Ocarina of Time charades, where there's so many trick setups in Ocarina of Time. So instead of, charading out whatever, we had a list, pull a trick out of a hat, and whatever trick it was, you like did the setup for it, and the audience was like guessing. And it's like only at a GDQ could you do something like this. And it's the most nerdy thing I could think of, but it was such a blast to see everybody get up there and like the audience is yelling out tricks and trying to figure it out, and they're doing the setup, and man, that to me, that's definitely a highlight of any GDQ. I think was pulling together that idea of like charades.
That is so geeky, and I love it though, because the only place you could do that is with around people who understood the game and knew what the hell you were talking about.
Otherwise, it looks like you're just moving around doing like weird things.
Oh man, I love that. But you're right. That's the kind of thing that you can do. And I guess this is one of the things I'm probably missing being around other people at live events right now, because those are the type of things you can do at live events that just don't necessarily translate to your family and friends back home who may not know what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that is so cool. I love it. That's really cool. There's something I wanted to touch upon real quick, if you don't mind. You mentioned it, and I noticed it's in your Twitter bio too, that you're an engineer. You went to school for this as your chosen profession. Quite often, throughout this podcast, we've had a handful of speedrunners who are also engineers, software developers, software engineers, all this kind of thing. Is there something about engineering that lends itself or it makes it good for speedrunning?
I feel like there's a certain aspect, at least in, a lot of things that I do, and why I feel like I was drawn towards the engineering profession, of optimization. You want to do this thing, design this thing well, but it's not just you want to do it just so that it works. It's like you want to make it as good as you could possibly make it. And I feel like there's an aspect of speedrunning where it's just like coming up with new strategies or really fine tuning. There's a thing in engineering where it's like you spend, 90% of the time on like the last 10% of the project. And I feel like speedrunning is very similar. Like you can lay it all out, get most of it done, actually finish runs, but to really perfect your craft and continue, it takes that extra 90% of the effort. And I feel like that's probably a big reason why I see a lot of engineers in the community. And I feel like there's also a nice tie over with, I'm not personally a musician, but I see a lot of other musicians, right. And I feel like it's a very similar thing of practicing your craft and really fine tuning the small details. And I feel like it kind of takes that mindset to be a good speedrunner.
Such a good description, and truthfully, that comes up the disassembling the small parts and spending the time on the detail with them, because especially when you start to get good at a run, those seconds, those little details really start to add up and matter. Mm-hmm. Ocarina of Time is it's over. Sometimes your run's over an hours and things like this, and those seconds actually do matter, which is kind of crazy as you're trying to improve yourself in your time.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so this is a question from the chat that I found was really interesting. Do you play any games for just the fun of them, or is it always speedrunning? I think that's kind of an interesting question.
Oh man, I mean, since getting into speedrunning, I feel like I have become far less of an overall gamer. It just seems like when I was in the N64, I had a whole collection of games, right. And when I became a speedrunner, it's kind of like, well, Ocarina of Time has a ton of things to offer, and I'm enjoying them, so I tend to stick with it more often, but. Yeah, I can still jump out of that mindset in a certain way. It's a bit harder with Ocarina of Time, but if I'm picking up a different game or a new game, I feel like I can still just, hey, I'm not trying to go fast yet. I still enjoy the aspect of, I go talk to all the villagers. I go, right. See what all these things are. I like to look around, see how, the scenery and the graphics of a game. So yeah, I can still get into it. I say get into that mindset. It is kind of, you have to prep yourself for it. Like, right. I'm just here to enjoy the game. So, yeah, I can kind of, once I flip that switch, I feel like I can get immersed into a game in that way.
Well, and on that same sentiment, I was watching your stream earlier today, and you were playing Ocarina of Time. Do you ever get tired of the game? It seems like you still enjoy it today. Maybe, I don't know.
I mean, it just seems like there's endless things that I could do with it, and I'm still enjoying it. I don't play it maybe as much as I did in college, or as much. I'm not at the top of the leaderboards anymore, but I'm still just looking for different creative ways to enjoy the game. And I feel like whether that's a bingo or whether that's some, randomizer, or that's, another blindfolded thing in the future, it's always, there's something, that continues to appeal to me about this game. So.
Have you played any of the Zelda games after Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, or even modern Breath of the Wild? Have you played any of those, and did you enjoy those at all?
I played Wind Waker when it came out, and I enjoyed that one a decent amount. I feel like I liked it until a lot of getting all the treasure maps was a bit tedious for me, especially in the first playthrough. Yeah. And then I played Twilight Princess when that first came out, and I liked that a lot. That was a fun game, and I started. It was when I found Speed Demos Archive, I think that game was pretty new, and I think they had started to do some speedrunning stuff with it, and I almost got into like some of the tricks of it. I was looking into them. I did one or two of them myself, but I never really considered speedrunning it. But I did play through it, and I enjoyed it. I have played through Skyward Sword. I've gotten that one when it first came out. The only one I think leading up to console-wise, I haven't gotten the Breath of the Wild one yet. I probably will at some point. But yeah, the series, I just enjoy kind of, it's the same, puzzles and items and quest in open world, especially the Breath of the Wild. It's more open world, and I do enjoy those aspects of the game. So yeah, the series overall, I'm a big fan.
Really cool to hear. You mentioned it earlier. You have a full-time job and everything. Myself as well, and so our time that we spend in gaming is limited, and a lot of times we're doing it on stream. So it's cool that you still do find some time to play the other games, but it's not. I can't imagine it's a lot of time to play any other games other than what you're streaming.
Right.
I think it's awesome that you're still streaming today. What was the first service that you ever what was the first service you streamed on?
There were a couple. I think one of them was called Ustream. Might have been the first one, I think. And I think a couple people were on like live stream or something called that. Until I think a couple people might have even been on Justin TV, which eventually did branch off into Twitch. But I think most of the speedrunners were around Ustream. And I remember, I think it was Giano was the first one that I saw kind of doing his attempts of like a Majora's Mask run on stream while he was also recording like on a DVD recorder so that he could submit the run to SDA. And I just thought, wow, this is kind of cool to actually interact with him as he's, doing, because before then it was kind of always just this solo activity. You were just kind of
a little bit solitary.
You would collaborate with the community, but then if you were going to try and do a run, you were off, on your own. So it was appealing to try and get into it. And I think I made an account on Ustream and was chatting in his chat. And then I eventually thought, hey, I want to figure out how to do this too. So yeah, I'd say that was my first experience with streaming.
It's so cool that you're continuing to do this and you're still doing it even after all these years and haven't been burned out on Zelda yet. So do you have any plans? What do you want to do next with your stream or speedrunning or anything, I guess?
Well, it was announced actually yesterday. There's going to be what's called an Ocarina of Time Championship Series, which it's kind of like those old impromptu goals, like user created goals that kind of test your knowledge. As soon as you start, you get the goal. There's going to be that in November. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Even if I always want to my goal is to make the playoffs. If it's like the top 16 or whatever, try and get to the bracket round or whatever. So I'll be looking forward to that a lot. Those are some of the most fun goals for me. Beyond that, I would love to do more charity stuff. I have a couple of ideas. I don't want to say them yet because I'm still kind of crafting some things. And I would like to do some other, blindfolded stuff in the future at some point, whether that's another OOT type of challenge or whether I try some other game. I'm a little hesitant to try some other game because, boy, I thought I knew Majora's Mask, but if I go into some other titles, people are like, go try, Twilight Princess. It's like, I don't know any of the rooms of Twilight Princess. Like, I would struggle. So
gotta have some knowledge.
We'll see how that kind of goes. But I'm still enjoying it. I can't wait to get back to GDQs in person when they're back. And
for real.
And continue to build and be around people in the community. So
I couldn't agree with you more. There is one last thing I would like to ask you about, and I'm curious. You mentioned this is the one of the things this thing you just announced, or just mentioned the race, the bingo race, or I guess it was. Do they have a name for it? What's it? Is it?
OCS, Ocarina of Time Championships.
Okay, cool. One of the things I think that Randomizer has done is it can create an kind of a level, I wouldn't say a playing field that is going to be somewhat blind to certain people, to a lot of people. And have you played any of the randomizers? Do you mess around with the randomizer at all? Because it's pretty awesome, all the different things you can do nowadays in randomizer.
It's crazy how many settings. Like I talk about, not running out of content. It's like you could literally mix and match a ton of things in there and keep yourself busy. I have tried a good bit of it. It seems like the Ocarina of Time randomizer community has steered more towards a less glitched rule set for racing, which pulls in a lot more people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I understand. I do kind of lose the freedom of, I could just, zip around here or do this thing. So I've done ones where there's more glitching involved, and it seems like there's a balance there where you're still trying to solve the puzzle of figuring out where the items are, but not break the game so much that it's like, well, I could just go to Ganon now,
right.
with like my bombs and my lighter. I was like, that's all I need. So I feel like we're kind of still playing with that balance of figuring that out. But yeah, I've enjoyed, the randomizers. There's been a loading zone one for years. That's typically what I do on my Sunday morning with somebody. And different modes we play, different bingos. There's all kinds of different ways to play that one too. So the randomizers, I feel like injecting just yet another new spin of how you can play the game.
If anything, all of this highlights what the community around this game and the passion for this game that still exists 20 years later. We're still excited. I mean, I at least do 1 or 2 full playthroughs of the game every year just because I still love it. And I think that it's awesome that all these new ways to play the game exist. Like, we are so fortunate to be in this time,
Yeah, and it's just, again, to go back and like look over the years, even practicing now, like people have put so much time and effort into creating like this practice ROM where you can just kind of, give me infinite health, give me infinite bombs, save state on your console, and keep practicing and trying tricks. And I just remember it's like, man, back when I was learning how to do tricks, it's like I had to go get a file to that point, to go practice it. And if you ran out of bombs, then it's like, well, I got to go to another spot and get more and come back. Like, now it just seems like everything's much more streamlined, and I feel like it just benefits everybody. Everybody benefits from, these people's hard work and collaboration in doing, practice ROMs, all the people that put research effort into the randomizer and, coding that in the background. There's a lot of work that's been involved with not just, I feel like so many viewers see the final run of like a speed run and the world record. And it's like, this person did all of this. And it's like, there is so much, so many layers on top of that so many people are involved with in the community. People that are good at routing, people that are good at glitching. It all comes together for that run. And I feel like that's why we can all kind of celebrate that person's run. It feels like a collaborative effort.
I couldn't have said that better myself. It's one of the reasons I continue to do and will continue to do this podcast. Fantassers, people who have helped on randomizers, these are such important people to the community because they're giving us like new life into these games. That it's really the amount of joy and pleasure and value that they have brought to the community is you can't put a number on it. And I couldn't have said it better myself. So agree with you, Runner Guy.
Absolutely.
And on that note, thank you so much for giving me some time and taking us down memory lane, if you will. It's so cool that you're still doing this even after all these years. So you haven't burned out on it yet.
Still going.
Thank you so much. I hope to see you at GDQ soon. If we can only get to be live and in person at some point. Holy cow! Yeah, I'm keeping my fingers crossed it happens soon. Yeah. So
I am looking forward to it whenever that day comes.
If people aren't familiar and haven't seen you, where can they find you on the interwebs?
Mostly on Twitch TV, Runnerguy2489. That's where my streams are. On Twitter, I'm also Runnerguy2489. If you ever want to message me, if you have any questions about getting into the community or you just want to talk. I've had people come and talk about running in real life. What shoes should I get, or how should I love talking about anything. So those would probably be the 2 places. You can also reach me on. I have a Discord. I don't know if you need the numbers afterwards to reach me.
I never know either.
I'm Runnerguy2489 there as well.
Oh, so. Nice. Yeah, I want to vouch for that. That as I've watched your stream now for probably 3 or 4 years, it's definitely a welcoming space and it's super friendly. Regardless of how frustrating the gameplay can get blindfolded, it's a really friendly place. I've really enjoyed watching over the years. So glad I got a chance to talk to you.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been great. It's been great to have this interview. I'm glad you've put this show together. It's definitely the content. I feel like, besides just the speed runs, it's so great to have things like this to have out there. So
there are real people behind the speed runs. This Runner Guy is an example. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. If you're enjoying the podcast, subscribe, leave a review. All those things go a long way to helping out the podcast. If you'd like to continue the conversation, I'm on Twitter @LatMackey, or you can also join the LatMackey Discord, where we have a sequence break channel. We talk about guests, we have questions. It's really interactive, really fun. Please feel free to stop on by. Thanks so much. See you in the next one.